Let's go into a little bit of detail about how to move back, particularly in the waltz, the foxtrot, quick step. And we were talking today about going back into the heel pull or into the heel turn during the pivots, how we have to renew the juice in the standing leg. But this comes up in every backward step that we take in the moving dances, and tango, of course, also, but we'll talk about the swing dances here because we are going to have the rise at the end of that action. But the mechanics here of how we need the hip joint to work in relation to the knee and the ankle in moving back is the same in all of the moving dances. But this is a difficult area to isolate and to use properly. And for you, Rich, what was happening today, several things in the rotation that we need to produce in the base. Your knee is wanting to move out. Now that's a common problem and happens with everybody until it's properly trained. So we want to discipline that knee to stay over the first and second toe while the rotation is happening in the hip. Now you may not see the rotation, may look like I'm simply bending, but I am preparing to rotate to move into whatever it might be, the pivot, the heel turn, or just the back half of the natural turn. But I need to make sure that the hip joint is active, that I'm getting a release there. And this is difficult for most people to do, tend to keep the hip forward. And so the knee doesn't bend properly, and now you can injure yourself when you try to bend the knee too far without creasing at the hip joint, or in turning where the knee goes out over the little toe. So I need to engage the inside muscles here. Now you can put your hand there and try to squeeze those muscles to hold the knee in the proper position. Or you can put your hand here and press inward to make sure that you're able to move the right hip. In this case, if we're going into a reverse action, it would be on the other side. So in either case, I'm keeping the knee over the big toe and second toe and allowing the hip to move back. I will show this with the chair because that's a good way to get the right feeling for bending this area and not having the hips stuck. So if you're going back into the heel turn or the heel pull, as the knee goes forward, the hip goes back, but the hip is going back with the entire torso. So we're able to maintain the spine in the integrated position, not ending up leaning forward or leaning backward or tilting in either way. So you have to think about what you're doing on the base. You will also need to activate the upper body. So if I just do this, you can see that I'm moving my spine back and my head back in space, not just doing the bottom. And then also we talked about elbow to elbow, the widest area needs to be active also, so that I'm feeling this width and this tone. So I'm activating the bottom to create the movement, but I'm also moving the top of my spine and the widest area. Now this all applies to the ladies also. Of course, I would be in a different position in the frame, and in competitive dancing would have more of a backward poise. But that needs to be put on top of an understanding of what the basic structure is. So the ladies have a little bit more difficulty in the way they carry their upper body. So we're going to stay for now with the man who is more upright, but make sure that you're thinking about feeling everything working together. Before we go into the chair, to make sure that position is correct, the other thing we talked about is follow through. So that as you send yourself back, you don't just grab that foot. This again would go for ladies also, it doesn't matter which part we're doing. If you send yourself, there's energy that continues and then you draw your foot back. So always feeling that all of the parts are working together and the lengthening is working together. So now what we'll do is use the chair so you can memorize what that feels like to have that bend. Now just to understand a little bit of the details here, many times we'll tell people to soften the hip joints as they move back. We often don't know what that means, so we'll sit in the chair to find out. But in reality, I'm really softening in one hip joint because we don't want to go back with both sides like this. So this side will feel full, the leg that's going back. This will feel as though I'm sitting down in a chair. But you see the body on either side of the swinging leg, the moving leg, this feels very elongated. That hip feels like it's forward. This hip feels like it's back. If you look at them then, they look like they're straight across. Now, of course, in reality, I either have a little bit of CBM or I have a side lead or a shoulder lead. So there is always something going on in here as far as rotation. We're not flat. Being completely flat, then that's where you might have both hips going back or you might be leaning back. There's always this activity from the standing hip in one of those configurations. So let's take a look at the chair now. I'll do this sideways. So what we want to do here is keep the head and the tailbone in line as we go to sit down. This is something we do a lot in Alexander practice to understand the hinging at the hips and keeping the integrity of the axis of the spine, the head to tail. So we're going to feel that. Now when we're dancing, we won't be able to do that. We have to manage the structures properly here and stand upright. But this is a good training for you to learn where your hip joints actually are, so you're not folding at the waist, either arching too much or tucking under. So keeping the spine long, sending the knees forward, the hip joints back, and keeping this long line from the tail to the head. Knees going forward, pelvis going back. And then you're going to feel all these angles. Ankles, knees, and hips. And in this structure, they're pretty much at the same angle. So this is what I want to feel, is this verticality here of the torso and the hip, the way you're sitting on your sit bones. There. So now I'm going to get into this position. So that would be where I would be in that moment of taking my leg back. You see the angle on this side and the stretch on that side. If I turn around the other way, so that's the stretched side. That's how I can remain upright. But this hip is back in relation to this knee, and that knee, you can see the relationship of the angle down to the ankle. So we don't want leaning forward, but we want to feel this is full, this is bent. Now when you practice this to get up and be able to feel it standing, what I had you do today so you don't put stress on the knee, you can use this back foot too, is press up but maintain this angle here so you can feel what that feels like. Because when we try this standing up, you're getting always a tuck. And I find this with a lot of people when they're trying to learn how to move backwards. So sit on the chair, feel that position, stretch upward so you feel the elongation on this side, feel the crease, help yourself out of the chair, and now move forward a little bit. So the deepest part of the bend, to be safe, is when we're in this position. So as you're bending, your spine is moving back. This leg is in motion. And you'll pass then through that position and then into the split. The reason I'm going over that, I'm going to use the chair here so I don't hurt my knee, is a lot of people try to bend their knee without bending their hip, or bend the knee too much. Now the knee can say that's a lot of bend, but I'm in a safe place. My knee is not out over the front of the foot. So the lowering is happening on the move. See, my knee is flexing slightly, my hip is moving back slightly. I'm still in the safety zone, my knee is over the toes. As I move the hip back, I can move the knee forward. But I don't want the hip to remain here and the knee to go forward more. Now, usually your body will fight that, because your body is smart enough to know it's going to get injured. But a lot of times people force that in dancing, because they think they should bend their knees more. It's getting the proper relationship of the knee, ankle, and hip. So use the chair, do it on the other side again. Feel the stretch here, feel the crease there. You see the angle here. My torso is behind and not forward over that knee. I'm going to press myself up. That's where I can be. That's my deepest point. If I still have more weight in the front, I'll have to come slightly out of that bend and then move back. So we use the chair as a training exercise because it is difficult going backward. And we were using this particularly in the pivots, ending with the impetus turn with a hover impetus. Remembering to reduce the leg before you do the exit. Now that would happen if we were doing a series of more pivots, that each time you move back, you have to make sure your standing leg is active and that you're on the leg enough to use it each time, or the pivots are going to fail. So today was a good time to come back and look at just the basic backward movement. In an effort to learn pivots, we of course need to learn how to move backward. So I think it's a good review of these mechanics.